Good evening, everyone. And really, thank you for being here in such large numbers. It feels good, like Payal said, to see the palms so filled up that we can't even put round tables in. So really. And of course, there's Nina, Shuli, Ritu, and Anjali who join us in welcoming all of you here today. The beauty about calling a platform the Arts and Ideas Club is that everything we present here seems like an art form. And today in this wild, wild country, we are going to talk about the wildest art form of all, which is policing. Policing is really like a double-damned enterprise because those who do it, the experience of it is damning, and those of us who watch it, receive it, are the recipients of it, are constantly damning them ourselves. It is really the profession that is surrounded by an idea of prejudice, dissatisfaction. We're always blaming the police. And so it is wonderful to have someone literally from the belly of the beast to talk to us today, to not just speak about one of the most gruesome, most high-profile murder crimes that there was in our country, but also to really give us insight about what it means to expose that, to fight the system, to work with the kind of manpower and circumstances that is required to do policing in India. So as all of you already know, the focus of our conversation today will be the Tandoor Murder of 1995, which was really one of the, as I said, first headliner murders that captured the country's imagination when a Congress youth leader, Sushil Kumar, killed his girlfriend, wife, Naina Sahni, and burnt her on this tandoor in a restaurant that he owned. And that everything that came afterwards is a kind of arc of all crime in India. Political interference, botching, postmortems that are botched, just the difficulty of gathering evidence and actually convicting someone. It took 18 years to convict Sushil Kumar. And Maxwell Pereira was the Supercop who was on that job. He ensured that there was conviction. The long arm of the law played itself out. And Maxwell has really been a very decorated officer. He's been given 9 national awards, many state awards, been part of many epochal crime stories in this country, including the Safdar Hashmi case, the Priyadarshini Mattu case, innumerable others which we will be talking about. But as I said, the real, much more than his decorated self, it is the excitement of having someone really from the gritty belly of the beast. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Maxwell Pereira. Thank you. It's wonderful to have you here, and thank you for making the time. This book is really riveting, and as I said, it's not just that it's a crime from 1995. You can see the arc of that play itself out again and again and again in almost every high-profile crime that happens in this country. The botching, the political interference, all of that. But just to bring the audience into this particular story, Maxwell, would you share with them that in this entire, as it unfolded, what for you was the most surprising, shocking, perhaps eye-opening aspect of this case?
Good evening to all of you. It's a pleasure to be with an elite intellectual club. That having said, yes, going back to the Tandoor case, I was just telling Shoma that every case is challenging. It has its variations, it has its unique features, but never less challenging for the police who investigate it. Now, in this Tandoor murder case, right from day one, it is Shoma's ilk that, are the bosses. They build the public opinion. They build the story. They tell you everything the way they want it, not the way we want it. So, right from day one, the public perception was of a chopped body. And I saw Shoma sort of correct herself because the tendency for everyone was to believe that the body was in the tandoor but not on the tandoor. And that is these are the simple things that build the perception. And even at the stage of the Supreme Court verdict, 18 years later, even then the talk was of the body in the tandoor, of the body, chopped up limb by limb. This is a case in which a high-profile political figure was involved. We had encountered this figure for its nuisance value because he was in charge of all the dirty work of the party. And why do I call it dirty work? Because the amount of field, management that is required for the rallies, for the, every single political activity was done by this youth congress. Any youth wing of the party does it. When I talk of the Congress, I'm not talking particularly of the Congress, though having been in power for 40 odd years then, it was the sole repository of political power, and no other could really sort of penetrate into it.
So Maxwell, what was the most intense political pressure that you came under when you were, playing this case out? 20 years later, you can tell the truth.
Let me shock you by telling you that not only this case, I have faced no political pressure in any case. That is what I did.
Maxwell, I thought you were here for some truth-telling today.
Yeah. You see, I'm sure there is political pressure around. I'm sure because there have been instances where people have tried, but then your reputation travels before you. Let me tell you that. And those who have tried must have lived to tell the tale. So it's never bothered me. A very illustrious senior of mine, when I joined service, told me, you bend but once. And, you'll remain bent for the rest of your life. But you resist that pressure for the first time. Your reputation carries before you, and you face no problem for the rest of your life.
Well, that's great to hear, Maxwell. I think the key point you made is that there was political pressure, but you didn't feel it. So that's a crucial distinction. But and which is why he's called a Supercop, I guess.
No,
but
I never became the commissioner of police, so there you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know, but well, there are various factors that decide.
Wear that as a badge of pride, that you didn't make it there. So, Maxwell, can you, again, it's fascinating. In the book, you talk about, I don't know how many of you remember this, but the man who actually was helping Sushil Kumar burn the body in the tandoor was caught red-handed by these beat constables at the crime scene. And there's a very fascinating point you make, Maxwell, which I'm sure would interest everyone, which is that you said you don't believe in torture. There's this very easy acceptance amongst most, I would again say, middle-class audiences that torture is okay, it's a good way of getting at the truth. But you say that you don't believe in torture, and will you tell us about not just this man, but maybe in a couple of other cases, how you arrived at the truth and why you don't believe in torture?
This is another public perception, and it is requested for, it is wanted more by the public than by the policeman. Let me tell you that. Because I remember as a very junior officer, when I did most of the arrests for the emergency on the night of 25th June 1975, I was one of the 2 officers who did all the arrests that were conducted that night.
Are you wearing that as a badge of pride?
Well, no commissioner of inquiry, neither the Shah Commission nor the varied commissions after that, called me even for evidence because nobody could find fault with whatever I did.
Procedurally?
Yes. So I do not condone those arrests. I don't want to divert from this thing, but that was a night when some of us revolted. We said that we cannot do this. We cannot bring in people sleeping in their beds. under the preventive sections of law, which is 107, 151 of the CRPC. And that is in a public place to maintain public order, which is resorted to in all these rallies and, sort of that kind of involving public maintenance of peace. So that is when we demanded the warrants. He said, give us under Defense of India rules, Maintenance of Internal Security Act, whatever it is, and we got those. And we conducted all those arrests, and when we did it correctly. Of course, the politicians suffered for that, but in the police, there was nothing, not a finger raised against any of us who did the. Yeah.
But I was asking you about torture in the
Yes.
normal course, that why don't you believe in torture, and how did you in this instance get information? And maybe if you can tell us one or two more where there are better ways of getting information than torturing people.
It was a sheer initiative of this beat constable, the lowest rungs of the police department. It was his initiative that rose to the need of the hour, and he responded with alacrity, with the absolute fantastic response, and took the initiative on his own when he faced resistance and everything. And yet he jumped the wall, he came in and probed and found the body. He wouldn't have known there was a body there. He was trying to put off the fire. And yet, when all the media was sort of on the rampage saying that Delhi has lost its sense of security, I called one of the reporters and I said, do you know what you're writing? This is the case which should have built confidence in you. Confidence, because the lowest rung, without being, sort of badgered from the top or anything, is the lowest rung that has risen up. That should sort of fill you with a sense of security.
So I'm going to come back to the constable question. You're kind of not answering my question about why you don't believe in torture.
No. Yes. No. Be patient. I will tell you all. There is no problem. Yeah. So, and most of the cases we don't. And I was going to tell you about this torture business as in charge of the Parliament Street sort of area. My first posting there was SDPO Parliament Street, a very junior, one of the first postings. And totally, I had to look after the welfare, the law and order problems of the entire area, in every house of which was an MP, a Supreme Court judge, or anyone. And there was a theft of a minor 100 rupees or something like that in a Supreme Court judge's house. And so, whatever, that time 100 I believe was pretty, But then naturally, yours truly had to go and pay his respects to the justice and did everything possible. They suspected the maid. We called the maid. We interrogated the maid.
Maxwell,
But
I'm really sorry to cut in.
But the complaint then it was not a commissioner, then the police chief, the IG of Delhi, was that from this justice, क्या interrogate किया इन्होंने? एक थप्पड़ भी नहीं मारा है. So this is the kind of thing. This is why I say it is the public and it is the powers that are there who expect the police to do certain things. And police don't go about doing these things. Most of you would not like to believe what I'm saying. But in this case, this is an example. Keshav, of course, did not, the co-accused, Sushil Kumar's co-accused, he was caught red-handed. He was caught at the tandoor, stoking the fire. And it was all in, practically in public, what can I say, exposed to every single moment of his was in public glare, in the media glare. And for the first 24 hours, he did not even bother to, tell us anything. He just said that I can't say anything. I'm too indebted to the to my boss. A sense of loyalty that he displayed, which cost him 8.5 years. We didn't want really to do anything about Keshav. We knew that he was a mere helper, a loyal helper to his master, but that cost him 8.5 years in jail. And for an offense which was the maximum punishment of which was 7 years. And yet, and these are moments of regret. One feels that unnecessarily he had to do it because we had no other choice. We had to make him a co-accused and a co-conspirator, which was not really true, And I have brought this out in this thing because our main target, Sushil Kumar, if we did not bring Keshav as a co-accused, the case would have fallen flat. At that stage, we tried our level best to make him approver, but various factors, including the judiciary, prevailed on him not to be an approver.
So, Maxwell, just to finish that point, because like you said, it is the public that really wants or believes, or there is this perception that the way to get information is really to beat people up in jail. Could you just finish that point about why you don't believe that is an effective way? In your experience, when people are tortured, do they give wrong information? Do they give right information? Is it actionable information? Would you dispel this notion that maybe all of us have of why torture should or should not happen?
Yes, let me not digress from that, because as you said, your impression that police torture is there, yes, I subscribe to it too. I don't say that there is no torture. I do say it is not necessary, because unfortunately, we in India have developed a culture. If I ask you anything, I want your answer, I want your action yesterday, not today, not tomorrow. I want it done yesterday. And that is the culture. And in the police, the pressure of the superiors is so much to get results. So much so, the police resorts to whatever other means it is possible. So I won't say that there is no torture. But then I do say that it is not necessary. If you do believe in the methods that are available, you still can break a case. The circumstances always, the forensic aids which are there, help you out to a certain extent. At the same time, in the book also I have brought in, with the current available laws in the country, I'm sure there would be many lawyers here, I make bold to state that I will never be able to get a single conviction with the current set of laws if I followed every law to the T.
So
and that is the position. I need to explain my utterances, because, like for instance, there is a burglary in your house, your jewels are stolen. What happens? Even if I manage to recover them from a receiver of stolen property, no burglar, no thief is a fool. He will destroy the jewelry first. He will crush it from its original shape and things like that. When I recover it, but the law requires me to recover the same item in the same manner in which it was. Otherwise, well, it becomes government property. How do I satisfy the victim? What do? I go to the receiver of stolen property. I don't prosecute him. I make him recast it in the same form or something like that. I get the victim to say, yes, this is the one that has been stolen. And that identification has to be done before a magistrate, because if you have told me something, it's not really acceptable in law. And these are the kind of things, when I say that law is inadequate, law is totally, and no evidence, no evidence given to a police officer can be used no confession to a police officer can be used in a court of law. The same British who gave us this law follows a different procedure there in England. So these are the kind of things that we have to really, and nobody wants police reforms because today, unless you have the police under your thumb, you know, the police support for the politician or for the bureaucrat, you are not only incompetent, you are impotent, totally. You have nothing, you know. And that is why they don't want to really let the police go from there. And we are fighting hard for this, you know, police reforms. The police reforms have been ordered by the Supreme Court. Every chief minister is defying it. The reforms ordered more than 10 years ago have nothing, you know, really coming up with it.
But
So,
Maxwell, you know, when you said that it's true that as of now, when confessions are given before the police, that it's not acceptable in the court, don't you think that's quite protective for citizens? Because very often, you know, like you said, there can be torture and coercion, and also because the police are handmaidens of political power, very often confessions before the police are not very reliable and have been, you know, extorted out of people.
police in no country are, you know, tolerable. Everyone is unhappy with the police. And yet, most developed countries have found ways and means to control the police, how best to control. And here, control means it has to be the government to control. It is not the government. You have the National Security Agency in NSA in Tokyo, in Japan, where police has only one representative, the police chief perhaps, or anyone nominated by him. But the entire thing is totally different from public office and not selected by the government. You know, and these are the kind of methods they have used to police the police. And this is something that we don't want. We just do not want. We are so complacent and happy with the state of affairs as they are existing. And this is something that I want each of you to put in your heads and really think before criticizing what is happening. Because we do not choose the right people to go to parliament. We have criminals, you know, sort of passing laws for us, enacting laws for law-abiding people to follow.
34% of the current parliament are, you know, criminals.
34, I brought it out in this book. What happens? 22 members out of 66 ministers in the current cabinet have criminal record. Yeah. Central cabinet. Central cabinet. And out of the 543 MPs, you know, 143 or something like that are mentioned. Yeah. Yes, 34% have a criminal record. We don't learn. We hero worship our criminals. We want to really. And what happens? Why does this happen? Because we cannot find prosecutable evidence against them. I think that statement has become quite famous ever since a famous figure's, you know, trial by the Supreme Court, not trial,
so
the
Maxwell,
society.
If you could just get some, you know, there are so many questions I want to ask you about encounters and constables and, you know, difficulties of policing. But before that, just share some personal insights for us that what would you count as perhaps, you know, maybe your darkest hour in all the 35 years that you were in the police force when you felt real despair? And the second question I'd like to ask is that which case would you pick amongst all the high-profile cases as perhaps the greatest miscarriage of justice when justice was not done? When you've known something as an insider and yet justice was not played out?
No, crime is part of human nature. It's, you can't.
We'll open this up to audience in.
Well, sorry, what were we talking about?
We were talking about two things. One, what has been your perhaps darkest hour when you have despaired about being in the police?
No, I despair when I feel that an innocent is being made to suffer. I mean, there are circumstances in a case where you are driven to crime. A simple thing that everyone is worked up over a traffic challan. It touches you the most, and you try your level best to get it maafied somewhere or the other, by some contact or the other. And why? because, and I firmly believe I have handled Delhi traffic for more years than I want to remember, you know, and and more often than not, I know that the offense is not your fault. It's not your fault. The entire traffic pattern, the system is wrong. We
Maxwell,
cannot have
aren't you sort of wasting your sympathy for us who drive cars and are worried by
No,
this
I mean,
system?
this
Aren't there
is what
much
I'm saying.
darker cases of miscarriage of
Yes,
justice? In
this is a simplest example where if your infrastructure, if your road conditions are right, if your lane system is right, if your grade separation is right, you want to violate. You don't make it possible to violate. You should, the traffic engineering, traffic laws should be such that it should not be. You should not be able to violate even if you want to. So that having said, that is the major thing that we really do not do in our country. We don't bother to go into the root cause. Traffic management is a subject matter of dinner conversation. And after that, everyone goes back to the same routine, including the bureaucrats who have to do something about it. So, that is the scenario.
But
But
I
yeah,
was asking you about the cases, like, would you be able to tell us about some case when maybe somebody
every
spent 22
case,
years in jail and been exonerated? Or, as I said, maybe someone who's been guilty and you know them to be guilty, some high profile situation where they haven't made it to jail. Which would you pick?
the license we have given to various professions in our country, police included, you know, what happens is that you sit in a judicial chair and you pontificate. There is no one who can question you. At best, a senior court can overrule your judgment, but nothing happens to you for whatever action you have ordered. Nothing happens to whatever statements you have made. So it has become fashion for everybody to indict, to pass comments, and things that have nothing to do with the case, but it's a matter of record that happens. At least formally, it was a matter of record that was readable. Today, is people use languages that they have not studied properly, not known enough, and it is a torture really to read through the judgments in most of the cases, and that is
So
precisely.
I was going to ask you that in this weak link of this entire policing of the country, listening to you talk, am I correct in saying that for you, you would say the quality of judges and the law itself are the weakest links in creating law and order and policing in this country? Is that a fair summation of what you've
No,
been
at
saying?
every stage, you see, you go to the prosecution. Prosecution is a very vital thing, but then we are morally righteous people. We cannot handcuff. We cannot, have prosecutors under the police department. We separated prosecution from the policing uh, as early as in the early 70s, that is now 73, I think. The prosecution wing was separated from this one. And there are some crucial departments only where the prosecution is still with the police, like the CBI. But the caliber of our prosecutors, I'm sure they try their lot, but then the caliber of the defense is totally unmatchable by the prosecutors. So in most high profile cases, we go in for special public prosecutors from the public, from the legal world. And they get in lakhs, whereas these might be getting in thousands, and it's incomparable. And that is the problem at every stage. So even in this case, every high profile case, we engage a public prosecutor. And lo and behold, what happens? Here comes a judge who listens to the accused, who asks, I want a defense counsel of equal caliber as the special public prosecutor, and of the same pay, same amount of fees to be paid as the special public prosecutors. And, and lo and behold, the presiding officer on the seat decide, yes, you will have it. Human rights requires that you have it.
So,
These are the kind of things that we had to go through in this case, and we had to put up with it. We are required to give copies of the, prosecution story, all the documents, all the evidence, everything that we have to provide to the accused.
so Maxwell, may I just, because I'm sure everyone's okay, we've run out of time as well. I'm going to open this up to the audience. Just to press you on that, can you pick one case where you think there's been real miscarriage of justice, where someone did not get the kind of conviction that they deserved, or was falsely convicted? Would you pick a case?
Unless you have, in public perception, as I told you, public perception is built by the fourth estate, totally. And mostly people talk about these cases, but then I won't be able to say about miscarriage of justice. What appears to be miscarriage of justice, yes, but then I wouldn't be right.
So let me ask you about the Gujarat encounter cases where police officers themselves were jailed. Do you think that, and they've all been let out now, was that a miscarriage of justice, that the police officers were in but the Home Minister wasn't?
Well, I'm sure this is again the public perception. I just had a tweet, on Twitter from Sanjeev Bhatt, the one of the SPs of the Gujarat, this one, and it's ridiculous. They have spoken, and yet their evidence was considered suspect. Why? Why was there evidence? This is what, one feels there are thousands of cases, not necessarily. We do not feel the highest, public personalities in the country today are not guilty. We do perceive them as guilty, but then we weigh which is better. Even if it is guilty, well, he's doing so much good work.
Okay, let me open this up to the... Sorry? Yeah, so are you saying that, what is the capacity,
Well, I can only tell this much. Perhaps a lakh of rupees in your pocket would be more weighing than the thousands of rupees in your pocket.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to give the mic to someone else. Yes, there's a question there. I just saw a hand go up. Yeah. Would you? Yeah.
We keep reading about the Arushi Talwar case, and it's not clear whether the parents are guilty, not guilty. We read a lot about the Arushi Talwar case and whether the parents are guilty, not guilty, jailed, freed, etc. So where is it? That's certainly a public case that we seem to have heard and read about. What's the truth, or where does it stand today in your view?
I think the highest, the best judicial brains in the country are, apprised of this case. Let us wait for the Supreme Court verdict.
Yeah.
Your guess is as much as mine.
Yeah.
Hello. Well, we've known Maxwell for the past 30 years, and what we really liked was that after the 1984 riots, he picked up the phone and called my father, who was totally, down and under, and we were thinking of moving out of India. And he said that, don't worry, all is not lost. And then he sent the cops and had a lot of our stuff recovered from, to whom it may concern. So I just told that him 20 years, after 30 years, that thank you so much, you did great policing. And let's have a big round of applause for that. We need officers like that. Thank you, Maxwell.
Welcome.
Yes.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, it took about 18 odd years to solve the Tandoor case.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Not solve conviction.
You'd be
Conviction,
surprised.
all right.
This
Now,
is the fastest charge sheet filed in the court
Right.
in a murder case.
Right.
That is in 26 days, in 26 days, on the 28th of July, the murder was on the 2nd. On the 28th of July, we put the case in court. It took another 8.5 years for the Sessions Court to finish it. and then the appeals in the High Court and the Supreme Court.
Maxwell, that's the second part of my question. For a common man to fight for 18 years to get justice, is it possible, is it feasible, is it practical in India with the police and the judiciary?
Before you go further,
Yes,
it's
sir.
not practical. You must do something to change it.
Right, accepted. Thank you.
Okay, okay. He's been persisting. Do you have a view on the Shashi Tharoor Sunanda case?
All that I can tell you is that, like you, I have read matters in the
Media.
papers. I have not handled the case. I do not know anything about the case.
You know,
Application of mind requires to be applied only in matters that matter to you. It doesn't matter to me. Yeah.
I think
I'm
he's
sure.
making a very valid point that as a police officer, you can't have an opinion on a criminal case. I think you need to look at the evidence, and he clearly hasn't looked at the evidence in that, you know. Thank you very, very much, Maxwell. You know, like I said, we were trying to get a lot more out of you. The story of the constable, you know, the person that we revile the most. So it would have been great to hear that. But thank you very much for joining us. And I think you made some very important points today, you know, pointing out how the entire legal system and the quality of judges itself are such an impediment to the way justice is delivered. Not to mention everything else, prosecution, evidence, the constraints, and of course, the biggest culprit, the media. So thank you so much for sharing your views with us. And we'll move on to our next session. Maxwell will be signing books after the second session.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me here.